Good evening, Lehman. We're grateful to be able to see you through this virtual Bible class. And this series that we're doing in December on Wednesday night is Fortifying Our Families. We started in week 1 with the quality of a personal devotional life of prayer and how that really strengthens the family. It's something that begins with us as individuals in the family, and then it spreads to our influence on our families. Really appreciate David Chang filling in last week and adding his own installment to this. Appreciated his perspective, and that is the importance of celebration or being joyful. It's something that Christians of all people have or should have an understanding of and should have more experience than others with true joy. As you can see, this week is the week of Christmas, and we're blessed to have Carl in town with us to spend a few days. And I thought I would start with just a few minutes of just talking with Carl, and then together us looking at another quality that will fortify our families. Carl is a gospel preacher who has preached since he graduated from Bear Valley Bible Institute in 2018 for the Hebron Church of Christ in Grant or New Hope, Alabama. So even though he's come to church and a good many of you have met him, I thought I would allow Carl a few moments to talk more about, give you a little bit more insight into him and what he's doing and what his plans are and just whatever else he wants to share. So Carl, why don't you tell folks at Lehman?
Well, there's not too much to know.
Okay.
You know, I'm the son of Neal Pollard. I've been preaching at Hebron. It's been great. It's a very small town congregation, not very many people. There's probably about 50 people on a good Sunday. Mm-hmm. And it's been a huge culture change between Colorado and Alabama. Gotcha. First of all, college football is crazy, yeah. But also there's just a different feel. Everyone goes to church, denomination, or there's a lot of Church of Christ goers mm-hmm. in the South as opposed to Colorado. But overall, it's been amazing. I decided to graduate, which was a good thing. Yes, and then I moved down, and then I've just been the full-time pulpit preacher at Hebron. So it's been going good. There's been some challenges with a small town and just some issues that every church has, but it's been
why don't you
smooth sailing.
Tell us just a little bit about how the congregation is handling the COVID situation as it currently is.
So they've decided to do drive-in services. Mm-hmm. So we actually did like this little bouncing back and forth thing where we didn't cancel anything, and then we canceled everything, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, and then I just taught.
And why was that?
Because of COVID.
So you had some folks in your congregation?
No, there was in the town of Grant. Okay. And some of the teachers at the school, and it's a small town, there's 900 people. Right. So when some people got it, everyone got scared, shut everything down, and then there was like a lull in the virus or whatever, and then we came back and we started doing Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, mm-hmm. and then that's when people in the church started getting it. So we've had 10 or 15 people at Hebron get COVID. So
y'all are much more restricted right now.
Yeah, so I teach Sunday morning from the from the fellowship hall, like balcony. Okay. Basically, I come out, I feel kind of like what is it in Princess Bride when he comes out and like stands on it and like addresses the people.
It's almost like
it's very weird. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm like want to raise my hands and look around at everyone, but they pull up in the cars and then I have an FM transmitter, so I can just talk over that.
We do that here. That's one of our means of trying to connect with our members who aren't feeling comfortable.
It's better than doing Facebook Live on Sunday.
Yeah.
Which for a couple months back in like March or April, that's all I did. All like Sunday and Wednesday. So I never saw anybody.
You did some of that from up here, didn't
mm-hmm.
you? Okay. Yeah. Well, now there's not yet a Mrs. Carl Pollard, but anything you want to talk about?
Maybe
on
soon.
That front?
Hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah. Dayton's going pretty good with old Emily and hoping to pop a question soon. But
you're so romantic.
I mean,
old Emily.
Yeah, old Emily. Yeah. One of my elders at Hebron calls her Emerlou.
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 All right.
Yeah, but
we love Emily.
Too.
She's a great girl.
Yeah.
Well, you and I discussed this as you were on your way up here today about a quality that we thought is important to emphasize. I've only got these 4 Wednesdays to talk about how we can fortify our family. And I asked you, and I really appreciated your answer, and that is that for families to be fortified, they need to be united. So before we get into some further discussion about that, what did you mean by that?
So most families, when they're not functional or they're not very healthy, a lot of times there's an underlying split or something, whether it's a rejection of rules that have been set in place, or parents not following through with their word, they're not staying true to their commitments, or it's children just not really getting along with their parents. When you look at a family that has dysfunction, a lot of times I believe that it comes down to a problem being unified. Mm-hmm. In fact, you look at Philippians 4, of course, the church there wasn't unified because of bickering and fighting, and so fighting and bickering can split a family. But I think when we want to grow and strengthen our families, unity is going to help us with that goal, because we all have a common mindset of what we're trying to get done. And even in the world, to an extent, if there is something like, let's say you're in the Army, you have a unified purpose, a goal that you're trying to achieve, and so there's unity among soldiers. And I think in a family, if you have that sort of common mindset, that common goal, and that underlying foundation of objective truth, then you're going to have unity, which leads to a stronger, fortified family.
So I was going to ask you, why do you think that families are struggling to find that unity that ought to be automatic for people who believe in God and who have followed Jesus and He's the Lord of their lives? And I think there's some answers in just what you've said. If we don't believe that there's an objective standard of truth, then it's going to be hard. That should be what makes us united
and glues everything together.
Yeah. And if we don't know what that is, then it's going to be very hard.
Because then it's just going to be one opinion against another. Yeah. No one's really going to, work together on it. If it's just your opinion versus mine, right, there's no reason for me to conform to yours or you to mine.
And home is a great place for children to learn that truth, because they're going to find that. And we expect there to be truth in so many different places that it's not going to really bend to what we want. And so that's a great training ground. Well, I thought we would talk about unity and how it can really fortify our families, or what it requires if there's going to be unity in our homes. And unity is not always a good thing. In Jeremiah chapter 7 and verse 18, we read about a time when the people of God were in a lot of spiritual trouble. A lot of homes were in trouble and were divided. They may have been united together, but they were divided against God. In Jeremiah chapter 7, Jeremiah talks about how the children went and gathered the wood, and the fathers made the fire, and the mothers kneaded dough to bake cakes to the Queen of Heaven. And God says, and that's in order to spite me. It was great to see them united together, but they were united in evil. You were talking about a time earlier in Israel's history, at the really the formative years. They hadn't even taken the land of Canaan yet, and they had the greatest leader, perhaps in some ways, they'd ever have, Moses. And he's going up to get the 10 Commandments, and what's happening with the families down below?
Yeah, as soon as he goes up the mountain, it's like they just, forget everything that God had done, and then everyone is unified, and they come together, and they throw all their gold and all their earrings and everything into the fire, and then Aaron even helps with it, and then they build a golden calf. So they're unified in building an object of idolatry.
So Aaron, Moses' brother, is joining in and being unified in a way that's not good.
They were unified, but it was totally against what God had called for them to do.
That's right. Exodus 23:2 is a little bit later is going to say, you're not to follow a multitude to do evil. You can all be one on the wrong page, but God's going to be displeased. We could probably say a lot about this, but I want us to think about at least 4 things that are necessary for us to fortify our families through unity. And this is not exhaustive, and in this particular case, going to take a little bit more topical approach and not necessarily look at one specific text. These are ingredients that can help us to build unity in our families. The first element that I think is important to unity is commitment. Would you agree that commitment, the right kind of commitment, leads to unity in the family?
Well, absolutely, because if you have commitment, then you're going to have a reason to draw closer. You're going to be committed, first of all, to following through with your family, even if you don't feel like it. If it's something that you don't want to do, as long as you've promised to stay committed, or you've promised to work after that unity, then you're going to have families that are actually built on resolve, that are actually going to work at being unified. If you're not committed to it, then the second it gets hard, you're just going to flop out, and there's not going to be any progress to what you're trying to do with that family. If you're the leader of it, or if you're a child in the family, or if you're a spouse or brother or sister, if you're not committed to trying to strengthen the family, then it's just going to fall apart.
That's right. I think about how from the very moment that a family forms, it's being formed on the basis of a commitment. A husband and wife, they stand before a preacher or justice of the peace or whoever it is, and they make vows, and they say that I'm going to be true to you. I'm going to be your spouse for richer or poor, in sickness or health, forsaking all others. They're making a promise that they're going to, as long as we both shall live, that's the duration of this commitment. And you think about each individual that makes up the marriage, and it's why it's important for husband and wife to be spiritually united. Each of those, if they are Christians, when they get married, have made an individual commitment at baptism. Mm-hmm. They're saying that they're going to deny self, take up their cross, and follow Christ. Now, if that commitment is strong, then it's going to, or it should be, something that we keep at the front of our minds when God blesses us with children, that no matter what else is going on, and we have commitments, and we should teach the importance of commitments. If you sign up to play a sport, you're going to follow through with that. You're not going to quit, even if you don't like it, or if it's some kind of extracurricular activity from school. If it's your school subjects, you're going to be committed to that. You're going to follow through until it's done. You take a job, you've made a commitment, and you're going to honor that. And that means, showing up on time, doing the work that you're told to do. Yeah. Those are values that have as their foundation the commitment that we made to Christ. And if we teach and we model and we encourage each other in the home to have that kind of commitment, then we're helping our children when they grow up to then turn around and duplicate that.
Well, if you show as a parent or a leader in the house, like y'all did, okay, if you show that you're committed to something and it takes first place, as it's most important, if you show that you're committed to that, then most of the time that rubs off. And you look at the statistics of kids that are baptized because of family, it's a lot higher than people that you just have a Bible study with. Yeah. But if you're and it doesn't necessarily have to be these big things either. You can be committed to smaller things, like if you say that you're going to your kid's game, or if you say that you're going to clean up the kitchen after supper, or if you say little stuff like that. If you're committed like that and you stick to your word, or if you go to shop at Walmart and you take a shopping cart, if you just put it back where it goes, just little stuff like that, it adds up, and it starts to build this bigger picture of you're a person of your word, and you're going to respect your family enough to follow through with those commitments.
I think that's right. I think about how Scripture tells us to be committed. Proverbs 16 and verse 3 is a promise. It's not just a command. Proverbs 16:3 says, "Commit your work to the Lord, and all your plans will be established." And I know that plays out. That's God's providence saying that as you do what you need to do to serve me faithfully, I'm going to establish what needs to happen. Don't worry about that. It's kind of a corollary to Matthew 6:33. If I'm most committed to Christ and His kingdom, I don't have to worry about the things of this life. That'll fall into place. Paul said in 2 Timothy 1 and verse 12, "I know who I believed, and I'm persuaded that He's able to keep what I've committed unto Him against that day." as I face eternity, I realize that God's going to honor the commitment that I make as a Christian, as a husband or a spouse, as a parent, and as a child. God sees those commitments, and he tells us how much that means to him. So commitment, I think that's certainly one. Maybe one that's associated with that, and it may build off of it. For unity to happen in a family, there has to be involvement. Is it a fair statement to say that Christianity is not just paying $1 and sipping the fruit of the vine and taking the bread and sitting on a pew?
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of worship in and of itself is involvement.
Absolutely.
You're kissing towards God purposefully. You're involved in it mentally, physically, singing, and you're emotionally involved in it. And I think you can take those same aspects with worship, with Christianity, of involvement, of putting good work in towards the good work that God has given us. You can take those same aspects and put it, with your family, because the church family is, the bride of Christ. Mm-hmm. And as physical families, we have an involvement to each other that helps us in serving God even more. And so if we're involved with works with the church, if you're deacons, or if you're an elder's kid, or if you're a preacher's kid, or if you're the preacher or the deacon or elders, or you're teaching in the ladies' class, whatever it is, that involvement helps your family grow closer and have unity, because each one in the family is involved in Christianity and has that common goal that helps bring unity.
So, and I've seen that, and it's just this week I've been the recipient of multiple families who have had their kids involved, and they either dropped it by the building or dropped it by our house, cookies or baked goods, and they help to decorate those. They're getting in the car and they're going with their parents, and to me that's teaching a valuable lesson that's going to live in these children, that their faith is not just confined to the building on Sunday or Wednesday when we're able to meet.
Christianity is a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle. Yeah, and it's a lifestyle of involvement. And you think about what they're doing. And they do this to go see the elderly and the sick, and those steps of involvement. How do they live in you as you grow up and you've seen those kinds of things? What impressions do they make on you? If you go to visit a hospital, or if you're able to sit in on a Bible study, or just go to a work day and being involved in that, what impression? You're an adult now, but you're my kid, so I wonder how that.
Well, you would always take us to gospel meetings, and you would help us, and you would sometimes make us get involved. I did not like the fruit basket making. Mm-hmm. That was the wrapping and the crinkling and throwing all the stuff in there. I liked delivering them, mm-hmm. but making the fruit baskets I didn't want to do, because first of all, it was early on Saturday morning.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I wasn't a fan of that. But the older I got, the more I realized what it was doing for other people. So if there's no desire for involvement, sometimes you can give a little push like you guys would, and make us get in the car at 8 o'clock and make fruit baskets on Saturday. But that really does change your perspective. It changes it from thinking about yourself to thinking about what it does for other people and strengthening other people. But I think the involvement that I got growing up actually helped me make those visits, helped me think about what other people are struggling with. I don't deliver fruit, because that's not. I don't know if that's really as important, but the actual delivering and meeting of those needs in the service, that's come about because of the involvement that I had growing up.
Well, and it's really good when families can do that together. And I've appreciated that, and all of you at Lehman that are doing that. I saw elders with their families going out and visiting members here in the congregation. So many. When deacons were picking up those fruit baskets, as we do here.
And they do it here too?
Yeah, so often
it's a great thing.
Children.
It's a great thing.
Children were showing up with them and going and doing that. That's going to live on after you leave the home.
I still remember it.
Yeah.
And that was a long time ago.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Let's deal with maybe a couple of more before we close the video. Unity requires, so we've seen it involves commitment, it involves involvement, but it also involves reinforcement.
The paddle.
Okay, well, I don't necessarily mean the discipline, but
That's one way to do it.
It's following through. It's that what we say needs to be not just said. There's so many ways where that applies. Most homes have rules, and now a lot of this involves subjectivity and judgment, and there's not to say that one way is the foolproof way and the other ways aren't as good. But we talked about something that we heard when we were young parents and that we tried to enforce with you guys when you were small. If you were misbehaving and we needed you to come to us, you probably never heard us. You didn't even know if we could count or not, because we never would do.
Never
I'm going to count to 3.
Mm-hmm.
So what we would do is we'd say, "Come here," and if you didn't come here, what would happen?
You had a special paddle, or your hand,
Yeah.
or mom's hand for a little bit. Then we grew up,
But did you get the point of that? What was the
absolutely,
point?
yeah. And the point is, we listen to you when you say something, and from that, you actually have a respect for the rules that have been laid down. And even though, as you said, a lot of them are subjective, and you have to kind of just not make it up as you go, but it is something that the parents
what's more effective.
because the Bible doesn't tell you curfew times or what words, what like every single word to use, what not to use, all that. A lot of that is subjective stuff that the parents have to make. And I think as children, I almost said we, but they, I'm not really a child.
You're my child, but you're
yeah,
not a child.
you have to realize that they have the final say, and that reinforcement actually does bring about unity. I don't know if well, obviously you've seen them, but like families that don't really, like kids that'll like backtalk their parents, and their parents will say something and the kids just won't do it and just like blatantly just ignore it. I stayed at a couple of kids' houses growing up, and I would see that, and I'm going, because it's like you go from one family and you have like, not to say that ours was perfect, but it was pretty much perfect.
No, it was not.
And you had like unity though, and we knew how to have fun, but we also knew when to listen and rules and all that. And then you go to these other houses and it's just dysfunction and a lot of screaming and a lot of hatred, and it's just, it's sad to see when people don't reinforce and the good that can come from it.
Well, Carl, of course, has an idealized memory of things growing up.
That's true.
But something that can help us, husbands and wives, is to back up our mates. That if you have a little different view of how something should be decided, or even how punishment should be administered, you don't have that discussion in front of your children. You have that in private. There should be a united front, because children are like sharks. They can smell the blood, and if there's disunity, they'll pick up on that. But reinforcement also has the idea of us showing them that truth is truth, even if it affects our families. What's going to happen in our families eventually is that there's going to be times where members of that family don't do what they're supposed to do. They're going to be disobedient to God, and then we as families are faced with how to respond to that. I've known folks who in their families believe the truth about something, but when a child or a parent was guilty, that all of a sudden they restudied it and they had a different biblical position about it. But that principle of reinforcing truth, that God's, when you mentioned this to start out, God's word is the standard. We reinforce that, and the rules apply to all of us, and our job is to conform to the standard and not shape it to our family situation.
I think a lot of times, or at least some of the times, when it comes to families, there's a lot of emotions involved. Mm-hmm. And it's easier when you're talking to a coworker or someone in the world to talk about all these different things that need to be done and that should be done, and this is the way you live as a Christian, this is what the Bible says. But when it comes to your families, it's a lot harder to make those same statements, because there's emotions, there's a lot more of a connection, there's more love, there's more shared history. And so there has to be a balance of showing love and understanding that emotion there, but also understanding the objective truth that God has given to us, and realizing that needs to be reinforced because God expects us to enforce His word.
That's a great point. Well, let's deal with one more, and this idea of what unity requires. Wouldn't you say that it requires equipment? That is, the act of equipping each family member to be the best servant of God that they can be. I think about Ephesians chapter 4. It's a passage that's real important to us here at Lehman as we look about how we need to grow together. And he talks about what every individual joint supplies. Back behind that, he talks about how God gave different jobs, different offices, different works in the church. And he gives several reasons why in verse 12. And one of them is for the equipping of the saints. Now I think about how each family unit really helps the church to do that job if they're doing the job at home. And how we look at the time that we have. And of course, it's not just our children, it's grandchildren, wherever we can influence our families. But the window of influence is very brief. Yeah. And so we've got to do all that we can to be setting up the building blocks to equip each of us in the family to serve God better. Right. And you think about how we've talked about a lot of the ways that would serve to do that. But I think about how it's important to equip, and I'll just confine this to children because of the point that I think that's important to make here. We need to equip our children for academics. We need to equip our children to help them to find an occupation. We need to equip our children, and this is very vital. All of these are. We need to equip our children to be socially well-adjusted. We need to equip them to find or to know what to look for in a spouse. But if we do all of that and we don't equip ourselves and our children and our families to meet God at the judgment, then we failed. If we have kids who grow up, or if we have family members who are successful in business, they are really well respected and they're really prosperous, and they have gotten a great education, and they got diplomas on their wall, and they marry well, and that may mean somebody who's got influence in the community, but they don't have a faith that lives inside of them. I just can't help but think of when I was in school. Brother Winkler would always adapt what Jesus says in Matthew 16:26, which says, "What shall a man be profited if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" He would tell us as preachers, as we would go into our work, what shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own family? What will a man give in exchange for his family? We can't afford to make that mistake. Any thoughts about, or any goals? Obviously, because
I was going to say, I don't really have
but you have
to equip yet.
You have aspirations
dogs
in your home. Yeah, you do.
See, I got to equip them with the knowledge of not to eat the ornaments on the tree.
Yeah, that's right.
They've already done that.
Yeah.
So I'm failing. But goals for equipment would probably be to study for themselves, to show them and sit down, kind of like we did growing up, where we'd have the devos. And you would do we would conduct it, or you would do like a short little devo, and you made it a priority first of all. And so that seeing that every night when we would do that together as a family really sticks out first of all. But also it gave us our own zeal, our own want to do that too. And I think for future goals, not right now, it would be something along those lines of making studying God's word a priority and cutting out time to do that, and equipping them with the same thing that you gave me, and that is a zeal to do that.
Well, there's a whole lot more that needs to be done, and there's a whole lot more that we wish that we had done. I think, first of all,
I think I'm pretty perfect.
Well, it's a blessing and it's a challenge every day. For us to have the kind of families that we need to have, and nobody does it perfectly, but God has given us the blueprints. He's given us the instructions that can help us to fortify our families, and we need to be united in truth. And when we are, when everybody's pulling in the same direction, and everybody has the same goal of going to heaven, it makes the journey, though it's going to have some potholes and some hills, it makes it so joyful, and you can look back without regret. Now, if you think about the fact that there are those of you listening whose children are already grown, and those opportunities, maybe missed and made, are all in the past, just think about how you continue to have the opportunity to influence your family, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your nieces and nephews. There's some of you who do not have children of your own, but you can bless so many other families by incorporating some of these same principles. God has given us such opportunity. And right now, in the circumstances we find ourselves in, our families can shine, even though we're more isolated and confined than we have been. And we remind ourselves the current circumstances won't be forever, but the daily, inglamorous, ordinary things that are going on day after day are the building blocks, not only for the future, but for eternity. Carl, I'm so glad that you were here and were a part of this, and thank you for taking up your time of not currently drinking eggnog or eating Christmas candy and cookies.
I gotta take a break on that.
Yeah, I understand. Me too. I should have stopped a long time ago. But we'll look forward to seeing you on Sunday. I will. Carl will be back preaching at the Hebron congregation. But thank you for spending time with us, and may God bless us as we seek to fortify our families. Amen. Happy holidays from our family to yours.
Merry Christmas!